And we continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, middle of Siman Kof Ayin Hey. The halachas of Hatov Metiv. We ran out of time in Sif Aleph, so we're going to learn Sif Beis. It'll be a shorter shir by itself, and then we'll get back up to the Amid with Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber in Sif Beis. Anytime you change wines, you make this bracha. Feel any idea, important words. Even if you do not know, you do not know that the second wine is better than the first one. Says the Mechaber, that doesn't make a difference. As long as it is not worse. So this is another one of the things that everyone says, that you can't make a teiva meitiv, because who's to know if the second one is better? V'chulu, that is not the qualification, it says the Mechaber. The Mechaber says the second one just cannot be worse. Says the Ramah, doesn't make a difference if they're both new wines or echad chadash v'echad yashan, one new and one old. Even if you drink the same wine within 30 days, it's not the same dinam as shechiyanu. If you first had a red wine and then you had a white wine, even though the white wine is not as good, still. Why? Because white has its own milos. White is healthier for the body, says the Mishnah Berurah. Therefore, even though red was better, still you make a new bracha on the white. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkatan Zayin, She'ena Yedeya Shu Garua, those powerful words of the Mechaber. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval, however, if you know that the second one is worse, I feel even a little bit. Even though it's a different type, you do not make a bracha on something that you know is worse. Says only if you're not sure. It's difficult to even drink it. Says Mishmur Sivkatan Tas, Vein Chalik. I knew. Whether we're talking about Beri Gafin, you don't have to make from new to old. What's the reason? Meaning the two different types. As we will see. Why? It's new wine. Says the Mishnah Berurah, unless you know that the new one is as good as the old one, because of course older wines are better. It comes to exclude from that which holds that if you drink within 30 days of this wine, in Chavilav, it's not dear to you, Kamash Malan, we are paskening that even if you drink within 30 days, you still can make the bracha v'atayv meitiv. Yosei Gurua Sivkatin Yirbeis or Taleimar. Gurua Ksas, Aval Gurua Harbe, then lo yavarich. Again, these are the words of the Ramah, that the Ramah says that when you're going from red to white, So white, even though it's not as good, but it's better, it has other beneficial qualities. Mishabura points out, but it can't be much worse. Then you wouldn't make a bracha on it. Yosef and Adam Sivkatin Gimel. Umikol Makayim, says the Mishnah Berurah. Mikol Makayim, Imshasa Lavan Techila. Let's say you had the white wine first. You'd also make that type. Why? If the red is better. The lavan is considered worse than it. And we'll point out the big machlekes hapaiskim lemaisa. What if the red wine is better wine? There are wines that the red, and maybe it's a much more chashav wine, etc. So let's see the Dirshu over here, number 8, points out that you don't make a bracha if it's garua yos, even though it's another mint. If you know that they're both equal, says the Pri Megadim, don't make a taiva meitiv. And the Kavachaim says the same, which is if that's arguing on our mechaber that says as long as you don't know it's worse or not, unclear. The Mechaber says as long as you don't know it's worse, which would sound like it's equal, you could make the bracha. Lamaisa, the Kaf Chaim is machmir, like the Pri Megadim, not to make a bracha in such a scenario. Says the Dirshu. But rather, they do special processes and they add in certain entities to make it a chash of a wine. Says the Mincha, you do not make a teiva meitiv, because it has to be inherently better. If you have it after one that is cheaper, but it's a better quality, you only make a bracha on shina yain shemeshubach machmas atzmoi, has to be inherently better. It's a better wine. Etc. Yishal Avram Kaf Chaim says the same. How one necessarily would know that, it's a difficult thing to try to quantify. We'll just point out, it's true that Mechazitzach is machmer about this, but the Machaber clearly wasn't making such a differentiation, unless you could see that maybe Bisman Machaber they didn't have such a differentiation. But if one knows that one wine is better, then that would be what the Machaber was talking about, as long as it's not worse. You don't have to make even Mechadish the Yashan. If you didn't have in mind Lahedya to drink more, you just drink. Says in Reish Vav, Birch HaPeres Ba'idim Avarech, they bring you better ones, and it wasn't in your das. Says the Magen Avraham, you have to make a new bracha. Ali Rabbah says, no, you don't make a new bracha if it's another min. Be'er Lacha quotes the El Rabbah that you do not make a new bracha, which would be the Lamaisa in our scenario. And let's just start Sif Gimel, just to turn the page over here. Hivilo Yayin Ra, V'toiv Ke'echel, they bring you two wines. Yavarich, what should you do? Says the Machaber, you should make the bracha miyad b'yer pri gafen ala toiv, b'yer pri gafen ala toiv, b'yer tezera. You don't particularly and purposely make a bracha on the Rav so that you can make a teiva meitim on the toiv. You make a bracha on that which is ikar and that which is chaviv first. Let's just do the whole Sif Gimel. Says Mishmur Sif Gimel. Sif Kati Yadal Al Toif. V'misubik leiz the Toif Israel. You don't know. Motel Levarich. Motel Loi Lechatchil Levarich Bar Gafen Ala Achas. You can make a bracha on one who brings the Toif Ala Sheni. Avshuv Lefan of the Chilishtem Kachad. Again, this is the other Mishnah Brura that tells us. It tells us explicitly that even though they're both in front of you, you still can make that teiva meitiv, which was the reason why Chaim Chashamberg again answered up that stira between Sifkat and Dalal and Sifkat and Hey, that it's only if they're mamish equal, but once there is some sort of ma'ila, then you'll be able to make the bracha teiva meitiv. Over here, it sounds like when you're misubik, that itself would be enough. V'zehu Medina says Mishturam. Says Mishabura. This again bolsters what Rav Sheinberg taught us, and we saw from and we quoted from Rebelsky that if you have a suffix, then take one off the table. Which again, you could ask the same kasha, but you knew it was coming. So clearly, Mishnah Berurah is not going like the Lechem Chamudus he quoted in Sivkat and Dalid. Kosvel Yerabba, the Chayim writes Levarach Al Kama Yenos. Yisir Mal Kapanim Me'asholchem B'Shas Bracha Rishayna. V'achri Yishaisa Afilu Kama Yenos Varach Al Kol Echad Barach Zatoiv. And again, the Dirshu quoted us that the Kaf Chaim said, what should he do? You take all your wines, you put them on the table, and then you make one bracha, and you pater all of them. But we see clearly the Mishnah Berurah is not going that way. Because the Mishnah Berurah is not saying to put them on the opposite. He's saying take them off the table and make separate hatayva ameitivs on each and every one. We have one Dirshu over here, no number 10, on this last Mishnah Berurah Zekatan Yadala when he was misupik. So says the Dirshu, even though you could taste them, Vimkain, how do you make a bracha misafek? Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Shekivan Shaladasav in Tam of Aruch Halasheni Avim Ugarua Yaisim Yerishan. So Aruch HaShulchan explains you got to go into the sugya, and in this sugya, even though you make a bracha, you would make a bracha on that which is worse. And therefore, and the Yerushalmi sounds like the Rabbeinu Tam. Therefore, says the Aruch HaShulchan, you can be semich on this, and you don't have to taste it first. Therefore, you'd be able to make the teiva meitiv. Chaim Sheinberg explains, im misubik, you're able to make a bracha, because the ma'isi you're sameach, machmas the safik, meaning Rav Sheinberg is saying very balabatish. Do you have simcha over here? Of course you do, because you have a wine. You're not sure if it's better. That itself is an element of simcha. And that's why Rav Sheinberg let you make the teiva meitiv. Again, as we pointed out, this bolsters the tariffs in Sivkat and Adalins of Kutin Hey. This bolsters that which Rebelski taught us, that he did every Friday night, that if you make a bracha on a not as good wine, whether it's for Kiddush, for other reasons, and then you bring out a better wine, as long as you have the other conditions, that the first wine, like the Mishnah Berurah is Machmir, is not finished, like the Mishnah Berurah says, that you're Lissoid, you're all drinking together, that the second wine is not worse than the first, and your Sayyid, which another way of learning that we'll see is that you have two people drinking it together, then you would, yes, indeed, be able to make this bracha of Hatov ve'ametiv.